All right, 7:42 right now, and Stivers for Lincoln downright proud to salute great organizations in town, and there's one here that is really gearing up for the entire month of February.
Always something great going on at the State Historical Museum. We encourage you to get out there and check out one of the free, amazing places to check out all year round. But Michael Moraine, you're here to say February is a very special month we need to be aware of, especially at the State Historical Museum.
Yeah, February, we're heading into Black History Month, and there's no rule that says you can only study Black history during February, but it's a good reminder and it's a good time to consider some of the milestones that we celebrate and observe during February. Iowa has two big milestones for African American history in 2018. The first one is a 150th anniversary of Clark versus Board of Directors. It was the school board in Muscatine. So way back in 1868, the Iowa Supreme Court took this case by Alexander Clark from Muscatine, and he argued that his daughter should be allowed to go to the Muscatine public schools with the white kids, and he won. So in 1868, the Iowa Supreme Court ruled against school segregation 86 years before Brown versus the Board of Education at the federal level.
That many years ahead
of
time. Yeah.
So, I mean, Iowa was really forward thinking way back in 1868, and so now is a good time to celebrate that milestone. If you've seen the big Shattering Silence sculpture on the Supreme Court Hill across from the Capitol, that part of that sculpture commemorates this decision. So it's a big year for civil rights in Iowa and the United States.
150 years, that is huge.
Yeah.
And is the State Historical Museum, are they doing it with a special exhibit, or how can we honor that by attending that building?
We'll have some programs coming up. There's no permanent exhibit, but you can find more information about Alexander Clark and his daughter Susan. And how they really set the pace for the rest of the country.
Right.
So that's
I'm sure a lot of schools will have that discussion.
Yeah. The other big milestone in 2018 is that 100 years ago, we were in the midst of World War I, and the first class of African American officers in the military trained at Fort Des Moines.
Right.
So 100 years ago at this time, African American officers or African American men from all over the country came to Des Moines and trained to become officers in the U.S. military. This photo shows Fort Des Moines. It looks a little different now, but I think this photo is from around 1920, so about the same era. And this photo comes from the collection. I love this photo. It's from 1917. So here was the first class. And it was really a turning point for the U.S. military and for U.S. history, and it happened right on the south side.
So this was the gathering spot then.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And so this class, they really bonded during this experience, and they served in various roles in the war. And then when they returned, many of these officers really became community leaders here in Des Moines and Iowa and wherever they were from in the country. So it was really a training ground for some lasting leadership that affected the United States.
Unbelievable. And all right here in Iowa.
Yeah, the other thing that I want to just make a plug for, we have just unveiled on our website, iowaculture.gov, a finding tool. It's a research tool that is an index for the Underground Railroad. So you can search by name or you can search by county to see what parts or what corners of your local history might connect to the Underground Railroad. During the Civil War and in the years leading up to the Civil War, Iowa played an important role in helping slaves escape to freedom up in the northern part of the United States and up to Canada. So all across Iowa, there are pockets of activity that you can find, and you can sort of, our researchers at the State Historical Society, they pore over documents and they work with local and community historical societies around the state. And it's an interesting unending project because you discover a little bit and that leads you to something else and that leads you to something else. I was just talking with a volunteer a couple of weeks ago who found the story of a man named Jerome Dutton who lived, he bought a ferry that transported people across the river, the Wapsipinicon River in Clinton and Scott County. Here he is. His name's Jerome Dutton, and he and his wife, Celinda, bought this property over in eastern Iowa, and they had a store on one side of the river, and they ferried fugitive slaves back and forth across the river. We don't have, he never wrote it down. There's where they lived in the 1850s and 1860s.
All right.
He never wrote anything down, but all the signs that we have collected suggest that he was probably a key agent in the Underground Railroad.
So we had a house on one side and a store on the other, so he could kind of go back and forth?
I forget what the arrangement was. I think the house and the store were
on one
close.
side.
Together.
Okay.
But since he operated the ferry, he was
kinda had
in charge.
control.
And the store was handy because it had a basement. And so from what we can tell, from what the research indicates, the basement of the store was a spot where he could tuck away escaped slaves or freedom seekers on their way to farther
hiding
points
spot
north.
there, yeah.
Unbelievable.
How about that?
And those kinds of stories are really all across Iowa. You just have to dig a little bit. And now we have an index, so you can find your county or your
And
city.
you guys have done the digging.
Yeah, we've done some of the digging, but there's plenty more digging
So
to
much
do.
more to
So we encourage people to go to iowaculture.gov and see if there's some corner of history in your neck of the woods.
In your neighborhood.
That
All right.
works.
As you said,
Yeah.
there's probably going to be more events coming up with the State Historical Museum. Where can we go for those details so we can
Yep.
stay on top of that?
All of that information is at iowaculture.gov.
Okay.
There it
Wonderful.
is. What an important time just to reflect over some of the most important people the state's ever had.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, 7:49. Don't go too far. We will be back. This is CW Iowa Live.